I still remember that Sunday afternoon as if it were yesterday. The sun was warm but not scorching, the kind of weather that makes you grateful for family, for life, and for the little blessings we often take for granted. My wife and I had just moved into our new home a few months earlier. It wasn't a mansion, nothing fancy, just a quiet suburban house with a cozy backyard and a small swimming pool. But for us, it was a dream come true. More than anything, that pool was special. We had waited for years to start a family, and now that our little daughter, Emily, had arrived, every moment with her felt like a miracle. She was just 5 months old, chubby cheeks, big brown eyes, and a laugh that could soften even the hardest heart. That day was her first time near the pool. Not for swimming, of course, she was too little. We had bought a safe baby floaty chair, the kind that sits in the shallow end, and my wife knelt right beside her, hands ready to catch her at the slightest wobble. I crouched nearby with a camera, trying to record her squeals of joy as her tiny feet splashed the water. "Look at her." "Honey," my wife whispered, eyes glistening with pride. "She loves it. She's not scared at all." I chuckled softly. "She's a water baby, just like her mama." Emily kicked and giggled, splashing little droplets into the air. It was pure happiness, the kind that fills a parent's heart so much you think it might burst, but happiness, I've learned, doesn't always last long when someone nearby can't stand to see it. Just as I was recording Emily's laughter, I heard a sharp, disapproving voice behind me. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned, startled. Standing at the edge of our fence was her, Karen. We had seen her before, though we hadn't spoken much. She was in her late 50s, sharp features, always dressed as if she was heading to some official meeting, even just to check the mail. People in the neighborhood whispered that she'd like to keep order. I hadn't thought much of it until that moment. "You're endangering that child," she snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Emily, who was still squealing happily in her FLO. My wife frowned but kept her voice calm. "Ma'am, she's perfectly safe. I'm right here holding her. She's not even fully in the water, just splashing at the edge." But Karen wasn't listening. Her voice grew louder, shriller. "A baby does not belong in a pool. Do you know how many infants drown every year? You should be ashamed of yourselves." Emily startled at the sudden shouting and began to whimper. I instinctively picked her up from the floaty, holding her against my chest. My wife's protective instincts flared too, and she stepped forward, shielding us. "Please lower your voice," my wife said firmly. "You're scaring our baby." But Karen only grew more dramatic, clutching her phone like it was a weapon. "If you won't protect her, I will. I'm calling the authorities right now." At first I thought she was bluffing. Who would call 911 because a baby was splashing under her parents' watchful eyes? But before I could stop her, she had already dialed. "Yes, emergency services," she said loudly, glaring at us as if to make her point. "There's a baby in danger. These parents are putting her in a swimming pool, yes, right now. She could drown any second." My wife gasped in disbelief. "You can't be serious." But Karen ignored her, continuing with exaggerated urgency. "Please send someone quickly before it's too late. I'll stay here to make sure they don't hurt her." I felt anger rising inside me, but I held it back for Emily's sake. I rocked her gently, whispering to calm her down as she cried into my shoulder. My wife's eyes burned with frustration, but she clenched her jaw, choosing silence over escalation within 10 minutes. The sound of sirens pierced the quiet neighborhood. My heart sank. 2 police cars pulled up in front of our house. Our neighbors peeked out from windows, some even stepping onto porches, whispering to each other. And there we weren't new parents, suddenly painted as reckless villains because of one woman's assumptions. Karen stood proudly at the gate, waving the officers over. "There they are," she declared, pointing at us like we were criminals. That poor baby was about to drown in their pool. The officers approached with caution, scanning the scene. One of them, tall with a kind but serious face, looked at Emily nestled in my arms. She had stopped crying and was now sucking her thumb, safe and sound. "Sir, ma'am," he said evenly, "we got a call about a child in danger. Can you explain what's going on here?" My wife spoke first, her voice trembling with controlled emotion. "Officer, Our daughter was simply splashing in the shallow end with a secure floaty. I was right there holding her the whole time. She was never in any danger. Karen cut in immediately, voice shrill. That's a lie. I saw it with my own eyes. They left her alone to flail in the water. It's abuse. Neglect, whatever you want to call it. The officer raised a hand to silence her. Then he turned back to us. Is that true? Did you leave her unattended? I shook my head firmly. Absolutely not. We would never do that. She's our world. I was recording her, and my wife never let go of her. You can check the video if you want. I held out my phone, still recording when Karen had stormed over. The video clearly showed Emily giggling safely. With my wife's hand steady on the floaty, the officer watched, then gave a subtle nod to his partner. Looks like she was safe. Nothing reckless here. But Karen wasn't done. She grew more frantic, her voice cracking. You don't understand? It only takes a second for a baby to slip under. She could have been dead by now. Are you really going to ignore this? The other officer, younger and more stern, looked at her carefully. Ma'am, I think the child is fine. False emergency calls are a serious issue. Did you truly witness any negligence, or was this just a concern? Karen's face reddened, and for the first time, she faltered. Her eyes darted between the officers and us, her lips trembling, but she quickly masked it with anger again. You're all blind. Fine, but when something happens, don't say, I didn't warn you. She turned and stormed off toward her house, muttering under her breath. The officers sighed. The taller one gave us a sympathetic look. Sorry for the trouble? Some neighbors? Well, they mean well, but they overstep. You're not in any trouble. Just be mindful, all right? My wife nodded, her eyes still wet with tears of humiliation. Thank you, officer. When they left, I sat down on the pool chair, holding Emily close. My chest felt heavy not with guilt, but with a strange unease. Why had Karen reacted that way? It was more than simple nosiness. There had been a desperation in her eyes, a fear that seemed deeper than just concern. I glanced toward her window across the street, and sure enough, there she was, peering through the blinds. Watching us, something told me this wasn't over. The rest of that evening, the house didn't feel the same. Even though the officers had left without pressing charges, the weight of the incident lingered like a heavy fog. My wife sat quietly on the couch, rocking Emily in her arms, humming softly to calm herself as much as the baby. I paced near the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough to peek outside, and there she was again. Karen, her blinds were half open, and though she probably thought she was being subtle, I could see the faint outline of her figure standing there. Still watching our home, my wife noticed my silence. She's still looking, isn't she? She whispered without even glancing up. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, she hasn't moved since the officers left. The shame of the moment hit me all over again, the flashing lights. The neighbors' whispers, the way some of them shook their heads as if we were the irresponsible ones. In a neighborhood where reputation mattered, we were suddenly those parents. And all because of one woman's accusation. But more than embarrassment, I felt unease. Karen's outburst wasn't normal. It hadn't been the casual nosiness of a bored neighbor. There had been real fear in her eyes when she screamed about Emily drowning. Fear that seemed almost personal the next morning. My suspicion grew. I stepped outside to water the plants. And there she was, already in her yard, pretending to clip roses that didn't need clipping. Her eyes darted toward me every few seconds, her hands trembling slightly as she snipped at petals. Morning, I said cautiously. Trying to extend some semblance of peace, she froze, then turned toward me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Morning, her voice cracked on the single word, and before I could say anything more, she gathered her tools and hurried back inside. Something wasn't right. That same week, a letter appeared in our mailbox. It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. Children are precious. Don't let yours near the pool again. You won't always be lucky. My wife gasped when she read it. She's threatening us now? I shook my head, staring at the shaky handwriting. I don't think it's a threat. I think... She believes she's warning us. But that only raised more questions. Why was she so obsessed with Emily's safety? Why had she called 911 so quickly, as if she was reliving some nightmare? The answers began to surface in the most unexpected way. A week later, I was outside mowing the lawn when one of the officers, who had come that day, Officer Daniels, pulled up in his cruiser. He stepped out, waving casually. "Hey there," he said. "Mind if I have a word?" I shut off the mower and wiped my forehead. Of course. "Is everything all right?" He nodded but looked thoughtful. "Yeah, no trouble. Just wanted to follow up. We've had a couple more calls from your neighbor Nothing that needed us to come out. Just noise complaints, strange reports. Always about you folks." My stomach tightened. Noise complaints? We barely play music louder than a lullaby. Daniels gave a small shrug. I figured as much. "Look, off the record, I think she's struggling with something. When I questioned her that day, she wasn't acting malicious. More panicked, almost like she was reliving something." I frowned. "Reliving what?" He lowered his voice. "I can't disclose details, but sometimes people project their past tragedies onto others. Just keep an eye out. Stay calm. Don't give her a reason to escalate." His words confirmed what I had suspected. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a woman haunted by something. But what? That night, I told my wife about the conversation. She sighed heavily, brushing Emily's soft hair as the baby slept in her crib. "So she's broken." "Not evil," my wife said quietly. "But that doesn't excuse what she's putting us through." "I know," I admitted. "But maybe if we knew her story." She shook her head firmly. "It's not our job to fix her. Our only job is to protect Emily." I didn't argue, but deep inside, curiosity gnawed at me. People don't just spiral into paranoia without reason. What was Karen hiding? The very next day, the mystery began to unravel. I was driving back from the grocery store when I saw Karen sitting on her porch swing, staring blankly at the street. She didn't look angry this time. She looked lost. Her shoulders slumped, eyes red-rimmed, hands twisting a tissue over and over in her lap. For a moment, I thought about driving past, but something inside me whispered, "Stop." I parked, stepped out, and walked slowly toward her yard. "Karen," I said softly, careful not to startle her. She blinked, looking up at me with surprise. For a second, I thought she might yell again, but instead, her lips quivered, and to my shock, tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't mean to cause trouble," she stammered, voice cracking. I couldn't help it." I hesitated, then asked gently, "Help what?" Her hands gripped the tissue tighter. "Seeing your baby in that pool, it was like it was happening all over again." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled as the words spilled out, broken and jagged. "My son. He was only 3. It was years ago, but I still hear it. The splash, the silence after." I turned my back for just a second. She covered her mouth with shaking hands, sobbing quietly. "And when I saw your little girl, I panicked. I thought it would happen again, and I couldn't stop it. I wanted to save her. I swear I wasn't trying to hurt you. Her words trailed off into sobs. I stood there frozen, the truth hitting me like a stone to the chest. Karen had lost her child, drowning her anger. Her frantic 911 call, the letter, it all made sense now. She wasn't just a bitter neighbor. She was a grieving mother trapped in the past, terrified of watching history repeat itself. For the first time, I didn't see her as the enemy. I saw her as a human being, broken, wounded, and desperately clinging to the illusion of control. But compassion didn't erase the damage. My wife and I had been humiliated. Our neighbors looked at us differently. And most importantly, Karen had brought police sirens to our doorstep, making us feel unsafe in our own home. The question now was, what should we do with this truth? That night, I told my wife everything Karen had confessed. Her face softened, though her eyes still held caution. "That's heartbreaking," she whispered. I can't imagine losing a child like that. Exactly, I said. That's why she reacted the way she did. She wasn't trying to ruin us. She was terrified. My wife bit her lip, torn between empathy and anger. But does that mean we just forgive her? Pretend nothing happened? She still humiliated us in front of the whole neighborhood. I sighed. I don't know. But maybe she doesn't need enemies right now. Maybe she needs someone to show her she's not alone. My wife fell silent, glancing at Emily sleeping peacefully in her crib. Then she whispered, "If we choose kindness, it has to be for Emily's sake. I don't want her growing up in a house full of grudges." Her words settled into my heart. And so, the next day, instead of avoiding Karen, we decided to take the first step. We invited her over. She was hesitant at first, clutching her sweater tightly as she stood at our doorway. Her eyes darted nervously toward Emily, who was nestled safely in her playpen. "I shouldn't," Karen murmured. "You probably hate me." My wife shook her head gently. "We don't hate you, Karen. We just understand you better now." Tears welled in her eyes again, and for the first time, she stepped inside our home. It was the beginning of something we never expected. A slow, painful, but healing journey. But neither of us knew then that more twists lay ahead, because healing isn't a straight path, and some wounds run deeper than you can imagine. Karen didn't step far into our living room. She lingered near the doorway like someone afraid of being caught where they didn't belong. Her eyes swept over the family photos on the Waller wedding picture. The framed sonogram of Emily, the candid snapshot of her first smile. For a moment, her lips quivered, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Emily gurgled happily from her playpen, waving a little stuffed rabbit. The sound seemed to pierce straight through Karen. Her eyes watered, her hands trembled, and she clutched the hem of her sweater tightly. "You invited me here?" she whispered, her voice cracking after everything I did. "After humiliating you? After calling the police on you?" My wife's tone was calm but firm. "Yes, because we realized you weren't trying to hurt us. You were hurting yourself." Karen's breath hitched. She shook her head, covering her face with her palms. "You don't understand? You can't understand. Then help us," I said gently. "Help us understand." Several moments, silence filled the room. Only Emily's soft babbling broke the stillness. Finally, Karen lowered her hands, and the look on her face wasn't anger anymore. It was pain raw, unfiltered, decades old, but still fresh. "I had a son," she began, her voice thin as a whisper. "His name was Jacob. He was 3 years old, bright, curious, full of life. He loved toy trucks and peanut butter sandwiches. He used to run through the sprinklers in our yard, laughing until he hiccuped." Her lips trembled as her eyes grew distant. "Seeing something we couldn't. It happened so fast," she continued, her voice breaking. "One summer afternoon, I turned away for just a moment. Just one. I thought he was playing in the yard. But when I looked again, he was gone. I found him in the pool, floating, lifeless." My wife gasped softly, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears welled in her eyes. I felt my chest tighten, a lump forming in my throat. Karen's hands trembled violently. I pulled him out, screaming, begging him to breathe. I tried CPR. I don't even know how I remembered what to do. But it was too late. By the time the ambulance came, my baby was gone. Just like that. Her voice cracked into sobs, shaking her entire body. "Do you know what it's like to bury your child? To go home and see his toys scattered on the floor, knowing he'll never play with them again. To hear his laugh in your dreams and wake up to silence?" My wife's tears fell freely now. She whispered, "I can't imagine." "Oh, Karen." Karen wiped at her eyes angrily, ashamed of her breakdown. "After Jacob, I couldn't look at pools. I couldn't hear children laughing near water. It was like knives in my chest. My husband, he couldn't handle it either. We drifted apart, and he left. And now it's just me, alone, stuck with the guilt." Her voice lowered to a bitter whisper. "I killed him. My negligence killed him." I shook my head firmly, emotion swelling in my voice. No, Karen, you didn't kill him. It was a tragedy and accident. You turned your back for 1 second. Every parent does. You can't carry that weight forever. But she only sobbed harder. I've carried it for 20 years. And when I saw your little girl in that pool, I thought I was saving her from what happened to Jacob. I wasn't thinking. I was reliving it all over again. The room was thick with grief and silence. My wife finally stepped closer, her voice trembling with both compassion and pain. You hurt us, Karen, she said honestly. You humiliated us in front of our neighbors. You scared our daughter? But hearing this, I don't see a monster anymore. I see a mother who lost everything. Karen broke then, her sobs loud and unrestrained. She collapsed onto the couch, clutching her tissue like a lifeline. I sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. You've carried this guilt like chains around your heart, I said softly. But you don't have to let it destroy you, and you don't have to take it out on others. Her eyes searched mine desperately, like a drowning person reaching for air. But how do I live with it? How do I forgive myself? I glanced at Emily, who was giggling now as if completely untouched by the heaviness in the room. Maybe by letting love in again, by remembering what it means to cherish, not fear. You can't bring Jacob back, but you can honor his memory by choosing kindness instead of anger. Karen's sobs quieted, replaced by deep, shaky breaths. For the first time, her gaze softened when it landed on Emily. She's beautiful, she whispered. So full of life. My wife wiped her tears and managed a weak smile. Would you like to hold her? Karen froze, her hands trembling in midair. I don't know if I can. You can, my wife said gently, lifting Emily carefully. She won't break. And maybe it's what you need. Karen's face contorted with fear and longing. Slowly, she extended her arms. My wife placed Emily into them, staying close. The moment Emily's tiny hand touched Karen's cheek, something inside her seemed to shatter. Tears streamed down her face as she cradled Emily, rocking her gently. Her lips quivered into a broken whisper. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I couldn't save you. But I promise I'll protect her. Emily cooed softly, pressing her little hand against Karen's chest. And just like that, Karen's sobs turned into soft, quiet cries, the kind that come when a wound begins to finally bleed clean. But healing is never simple. Over the next few days, things shifted. Karen stopped watching us from her blinds. She even waved once when she saw me checking the mail. It wasn't much, but it was something. And yet, whispers still lingered among the neighbors. Some didn't know Karen's story. Others did but judged her anyway. For us, compassion had replaced anger. But for the community, the stigma remained. One evening, as my wife and I tucked Emily into bed, she asked me quietly, "Do you think we did the right thing? Inviting her in?" I kissed her forehead. I think we chose the harder thing. The kinder thing. And maybe that's what Emily will learn from us someday. That compassion is stronger than judgment. But deep down, I also knew Karen's journey wasn't over. She had taken the first step toward healing, but old wounds don't close overnight. And our choice to show her kindness might just lead to a bond we never expected, one that would change all of us. The weeks after Karen's confession felt different. The tension that had once hung in the air like a storm cloud began to lift, little by little. Where once I had dreaded catching her eyes through the blinds, now there were hesitant nods, faint smiles, and eventually, short conversations over the fence. But trust takes time. Our neighbors still whispered. Some judged us for forgiving her, saying we were too soft. Others whispered that Karen was crazy and should be left alone. I ignored them. People who haven't walked through fire rarely understand the scars it leaves. One Sunday afternoon, my wife suggested something unexpected. "Let's invite Karen to dinner," she said as she mashed peas for Emily. I blinked in surprise. "Dinner? Are you sure?" She nodded firmly. "She needs family, and we need peace. If Emily grows up in this neighborhood, I don't want her story with Karen to begin with police sirens. I want it to begin with healing." So we set the table with simple, food roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables. Nothing fancy, just the kind of meal meant to fill the belly and the heart. When Karen arrived, looked nervous, clutching a small tin of cookies she had baked herself. "I wasn't sure what to bring," she said softly. "Those look perfect," my wife said warmly, taking them with a smile. At the table, conversation was awkward at first. We spoke about the weather, the garden, even the antics of a neighborhood cat that seemed to visit every porch but belonged to no one. But soon, as Emily babbled happily in her high chair, the tension eased. Karen's eyes softened as she watched her. "She reminds me so much of Jacob at that age," she whispered. My wife reached over and gently touched her hand. "Thank you for sharing that with us. We know it isn't easy." Karen swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "For years, I've built these walls around my heart. I thought if I kept everyone at a distance, I wouldn't feel the pain so deeply. But the truth is, it just made me lonelier." Her voice cracked as she continued. "When I saw Emily near that pool, all my fears came rushing back. I thought if I screamed loud enough, if I called the police, maybe I could rewrite my past. But instead, I just hurt you." I leaned forward, my tone steady but full of emotion. "Karen, we were angry. But we also see you now. Not as the woman who called 911, not as the neighbor who watched from the blinds, but as a mother who loved her son so much, she's still carrying him in her heart. That kind of love, it never really dies." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." From that night on, something changed. Karen became more than a neighbor. She became family. She began stopping by with small gifts for Amelia, hand-knitted blanket, children's books she used to read to Jacob, a little wooden truck that had once belonged to him. Each item carried memory, loss, and love. At first I worried. Was it too much? Was she trying to replace her son with our daughter? But the truth revealed itself in the gentleness of her actions. She never overstepped, never demanded. She simply gave what she had to give, her heart. One sunny afternoon, we invited her to join us by the pool again. She froze at the gate, her body rigid, her face pale. "You don't have to," I said softly. But she surprised me. Taking a deep, trembling breath, she stepped forward. Slowly, carefully, she sat on the edge of the pool. Dipping her toes into the water, Emily, in her floaty, splashed nearby, laughing and squealing. My wife held her steady, smiling. Karen's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't only of grief. They were of release. "She's safe," Karen whispered to herself. "She's safe." I watched her hands unclench, her shoulders relax. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from the water. She was facing a tan, finding peace. Weeks turned into months. By fall, Karen had become Auntie Karen to Emily. She babysat occasionally, read bedtime stories, and even helped my wife plant a vegetable garden in the backyard. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of gold and pink, Karen sat with me on the porch while Emily toddled on the grass. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think my life ended the day Jacob died, that I'd never feel joy again. But being here, with your family, it's like I've been given a second chance." I looked at her, my chest heavy with emotion. "Sometimes life brings people together in ways we don't expect. Maybe you were meant to be here. Not to save Emily from drowning, but to save yourself from drowning in grief." She wiped at her eyes and smiled faintly. "Maybe so." And then came the moment that solidified it all. It was Emily's first birthday. We invited a few neighbors, family, and of course, Karen. She arrived with a beautifully wrapped box and a nervous smile. When it was time for presents, she handed the box to Emily. My wife helped her open it, and inside was a small photo frame. The picture wasn't of Emily, but of a little boy with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. "This was Jacob," Karen said softly, her voice trembling. I thought, maybe Emily could grow up knowing about him too. That way, his memory lives on. My wife's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Karen tightly. I swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the depth of the gesture. Emily clapped her hands, giggling at the picture as if she understood. And in that moment, Jacob wasn't just Karen's son anymore. He was part of our family's story too. The evening ended with cake, laughter, and a warmth that spread through every corner of the house. As I tucked Emily into bed that night, I thought about everything we had endured. The humiliation of police sirens, the sting of neighbors' judgment, the anger we had felt, but also the compassion we had chosen, the healing we had witnessed, the bond we had formed. I kissed Emily's forehead and whispered, "One day, when you're old enough, I'll tell you this story." About how sometimes the people who seem the hardest to love are the ones who need it the most. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise. Karen stepped out of her house across the street, holding her own cup. She caught my eye, smiled softly, and for the first time it wasn't the smile of a broken woman pretending. It was the smile of someone beginning to heal, and I knew then what I would carry from this chapter of our lives. Sometimes, behind anger lies grief, behind judgment lies fear, and behind a neighbor's harsh words lies a story we may never know until we choose compassion. Because in the end, Karen didn't just give us a lesson. She gave us a reminder that love shared, extended, and chosen has the power to heal wounds we thought would never close.